Guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, Dictate a Farmer What to Do on His Private Property. Enjoy the hog farm revenge. One of my neighbors is a farmer and personally I think he is one of the best guys in the neighborhood. It's funny though because he is the only farm with the areas all around him now being housing. He owns about 20 acres of land and since it's only him he was thinking of using some of his land to build housing and only keeping a few acres to run as the farm. This seemed reasonable and he went to the city to find out what his options about it were. They found he could build lots roughly 2 acres in size, but he wanted to build housing that looked more like the streets next to his home. They were more densely packed, and he went to the city with that proposal. They accepted it and honestly from there you would think this would be the end of a very short happy story. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case as some nosy neighbors needed to get involved. See, on the other side of his property the houses were more spread out and they didn't want the farmer to build dense houses because it would look so different than theirs. The city told him that he needed to come to a resolution with the neighbors because otherwise they could object to the construction and stop the whole process for months or even years. The farmer was friendly though and went up to them trying to find a solution. He offered to build the larger spaced out houses on that side of his property for them, and the rest would be the dense housing that he wanted. It would cost him more money in the long run, but he wanted to just get a quick solution. They didn't like it though and demanded that he do the entire property as large lots. Now messing with a farmer tends to be a bad move no matter how nice they are. So, with his housing plans ruined he withdrew his application and came up with a better idea. He still didn't want to use all of that land for crops anymore, so he was going to get some residents that didn't need a housing plot. These came in the form of a large group of hogs that he adopted onto his farm. Now some of you might be asking why they are considered hogs and not pigs. Well, as far as I can tell from looking at them, hogs are clearly much larger. And if you get too close, they also seem to be a tad bit smellier, but that might just be my imagination. As you can figure though, the neighbors were not happy about this change from a bunch of nice houses potentially being built to their new neighbors being a bunch of hogs. They were so upset that they tried to go to the town and force the farmer to get rid of them. It was a farm though and he had every right to turn it into an animal farm if he wished, and he decided to just go all the way with hogs. I even asked him one day if it was expensive to get all of the hogs and he said between the hogs themselves and the supplies it cost him a lot for an animal that unlike cows or chickens didn't produce anything he could sell. He was really pleased with himself, and I got to be there when one of the neighbors stormed up to yell at him about it. Neighbor. What the hell do you think you are trying to pull here? I tell you no to your ugly housing plan and you decide to get a bunch of pigs? Farmer. Ma'am, I am just respecting that you didn't want me building the houses there. Clearly people were going to miss the farmland being so close to them, so I decided to give the people what they wanted. You had a choice between human neighbors and hogs and now you get the beauty of having hogs. Neighbor. Listen, we can talk about the housing. What you said before about the large lots by us and then the rest being dense. I'm willing to talk more about that. Farmer. No can do, ma'am. I already bought the hogs, and they call this farm home now. I can't take it away from them to build housing now that the land is being used. The neighbor left angry and kept telling everyone the farmer was stubborn and unwilling to negotiate anymore. They tried again to go to the city and claim that he didn't have the kind of licenses to be keeping giant hogs on his farm. Turns out that he went one step further and got every type of permit that he might need to protect himself and the hogs to stay right where they are on the property. He even managed to get a permit stating that his farm was a protected wetland. I have no idea how he managed this, but apparently if they take him to court, he will be able to get a lawyer. The cherry on top, though, is that all the kids from the neighborhood absolutely love the hogs and constantly want to go to the farm to see them. They are telling their parents that they want to be hog farmers when they grow up, and it's hard to not laugh at the looks on their faces when they realized all of this could have been avoided if they just let the farmer build the houses like they wanted. Instead, they are now forced to take their children to see the cute hogs and stand awkwardly right next to the farmer. Their last-ditch effort was to complain to the city about the smell coming from the farm. Hogs aren't the best smelling creatures as you could imagine, and with certain wind, that smell does have the ability to travel into a few people's backyards on occasion. The farmer just explained though that this was the natural effect of having a farm in the neighborhood, and he couldn't stop smell from traveling through the air. There wasn't a way to contain smell, just like there wasn't a way to contain noise any person made in their yard. The city basically told them to stop complaining about the farmer because his hogs were legal and there to stay as long as he wanted them. I hope they learned that messing with a farmer is a bad idea, because it will end with a hog farm being built in the middle of the neighborhood instead of some nice new houses that they wanted to begin with. Personally, I am still good friends with this farmer and go to visit him for lunch fairly often. Also, it turned out that one of his hogs was pregnant and let me come and see it give birth and even name one of them. I named the little pig Anarchy because I really felt like it fit the situation. We call her Ann for short, and I visit her regularly. The next story is titled, Turning the Ship Around, 15 Months as a Condo President. I just wanted to share my story of running a 16-unit condo in a big city for the last year and a half or so. I think we've made a lot of progress in a short time and have gotten the association into good financial order and gotten a real handle on maintenance. I've been on the board since buying a unit 6 years ago, but things were pretty disorganized. We had a management company, but they were notoriously unresponsive and slow to respond to emails, never came on site to oversee maintenance, and just did the bare minimum from what I could tell. Shortly after joining the board, I started bringing a laptop to hook up to a screen so we could actually all look at the same thing while we talked, and I started organizing records in a Google Drive, as the board didn't seem to have any organized records to speak of. I remember slowly discovering things about the building that were shocking examples of apathy or just nobody taking ownership. One example was a CCTV camera system which I had always assumed to be working. One day after a board meeting, one of the fellow board members directed me to the room where the DVR was, and we found it unplugged. It wouldn't boot. It might have been like that for years. Nobody ever checked it because nobody knew anything about it. I took on the project of migrating to off-the-shelf Nest cameras and getting a business internet connection and external Wi-Fi access point so we could keep an eye on our front doors. It was done in a month, and everyone loved it. I took over as president in early 2020 after the former president asked for someone else to take on the role. I think everyone assumed I would want to do it since I was getting things organized and working on projects, but I absolutely didn't want to work with this awful management company. I described them as basically holding our money hostage, and also hoarding information. There was no way for us to ever take action on anything on our own. Even the little camera project I mentioned above required paying out of pocket for the equipment so we could do it all in a weekend, followed by a 3-month saga trying to get reimbursed by our own management company. Ineptitude, laziness, and just plain unprofessionalism. The building manager is our point of contact, but there's a whole accounting team that he doesn't control, so he's just pushing messages around and can never make anything happen. Vendors are always paid late, our account gets overdrawn, there are mysterious or surprise charges that nobody can explain, etc. My first order of business was to fire the management company, whatever it took. The immediate problem was that it wasn't actually clear who was on the board. It was just the president and whoever showed up to the meetings. Occasionally we'd vote on stuff, but it was trivial, usually unanimous, and never the sort of thing anyone would really debate. I considered this a legitimacy crisis after reading through the bylaws and learning that nobody on the current board was elected, including me, and that we hadn't had an owners' meeting or elections in years, perhaps in over a decade. I didn't want to rush an owners' meeting, so I figured we'd plan to have one at the end of the year, with a proper election. In the meantime, I drafted a document listing the interim board membership so it would be 100% clear how many votes were needed to pass anything. There were 8 of us, in violation of the bylaws which define the board as 5 members and set to work making arguments for self-management. A lot of the time it was simply forwarding the god-awful shitty email responses from our building manager to the board, with additional rants from me about why this level of service is unacceptable. Every time I discovered some new screw-up, I would send it along. Overdraft of the checking account, cable company saying they will disconnect service due to non-payment, discovery of $9,000 worth of city violations for improper elevator maintenance and failure to inspect and test backflow preventers? Nice. $10,000 in unpaid elevator company bills? They made it pretty easy, actually. The vote passed with 7 yeas and 1 abstention. Writing the letter to officially cancel our contract with the management company felt like a huge milestone. We were on our own in November 2020. The transition was a bit rocky, but we just needed to make it over the hump of transitioning over money and vendor relationships. We set up Pay Homeowner Association for invoicing and common charge collection, Zoho Books for bookkeeping. We added a physical mailbox in the lobby for paper mail and set up a Gmail account for official email correspondence. It took a few months for the dust to settle, as surprise invoices would keep appearing, vendors who hadn't been paid, missing checks that were supposed to have been paid months earlier, etc. We ended 2020 with only $5,000 in checking and zero savings, but we had an elected board, a balanced operating budget, and a much better grasp on what reasonable operating expenses and what it would take to build up reserves and execute on various capital projects and improvements. The biggest accomplishment of 2021 has been a significant common charge increase, to get us into a place where we have a decent enough surplus of cash each month. I pushed for 30% but compromised on a 20% increase effective mid-year. Now we've got enough to slide some money into savings each month to build reserves and can execute projects for a few $1,000s here and there without flinching. 20% sounds like a lot, but our common charges were and still are pretty low relative to similar buildings, so it's not that much money for each unit. A 20% increase takes our revenue from about $100,000 to $120,000. Our fixed operating expenses are about $80,000 a year, so if we did not out of the ordinary spending, we could theoretically put away $40,000 in reserve each year. More realistically, we will spend half of that surplus on special projects each year and build reserves up over several years. It's been so liberating to regain control of our building and stay on top of things. Bills get paid immediately, everything that can be paid automatically is. If our porter needs supplies, we just buy them on Amazon. If a unit owner needs reimbursement, we can just cut them a check. We have a maintenance spreadsheet with everything that needs to happen monthly, quarterly, annually, and 5-year, and we review it every month. We even instituted a preventive maintenance walkthrough by the board each month to check things like the hallway emergency lighting, sewage pumps, electronic locks, high water alarms, etc. I still think we need more money, but at least we have a surplus now and some breathing room. I want to get a reserve study soon so we can have a real number for the reserve goal. It's a lot of work, but most of it is just organizing information. The most difficult, stressful part of managing this building is coordinating for physical vendor visits, elevator maintenance, sprinkler maintenance, exterminator, etc. You could just give them keys, but then nobody gets to talk to the person who comes on site, and things slip through the cracks. Anyway, if you've made it this far, thanks for reading. You can make progress if you put in the time and effort. The next story is titled, "This is like herding cats." A little backstory, I live in a tiny 40-home subdivision in Ga. Because of the housing collapse and original builder going bankrupt, it's taken almost 12 years to finish the last 30 homes. The first builder collected dues for about 3 years and had the entrance mowed 3 or 4 times total, then went silent for 8 years. The second builder never collected dues but left a bit of paperwork and less than $2,000 worth of void checks with one of the homeowners before moving on to his next project. To her credit, she tried to hold a meeting where people had to discuss how wonderful a homeowner association could be, and 7 people out of 40 volunteered to form the board. I made the mistake of volunteering to help out if they desperately needed me to, and was elected the board president by a landslide. Absolutely nothing beyond the CC&R was completed, so I spent the next few months getting our IN, paying the annual homeowner association renewal, getting insurance quotes, holding our first board meeting for the sake of establishing minutes, opening a bank account, getting all those voided checks reissued, and trying to keep my board heading in the same direction so I could get our first community meeting knocked out. To be honest, I've never been more frustrated in my life. 2 of my board members go radio silent unless they hear something they like. One that is semi-helpful is rarely sober enough to talk to. The other semi-helpful one informed me she's moving the day after our community meeting. I went door to door passing out the agenda for the first meeting, getting cursed out by anyone who either doesn't want a homeowner association or is convinced the homeowner association went away years ago. Even people that want this are throwing fits because nothing is being done. Mind you, we have no amenities, so besides mowing the entrance myself, there's nothing to do. Then I have people raising a stink because the meeting needs to be moved because they can't make it. I'm about ready to quit and write my personal expenses off as a valuable lesson. The last story is entitled Neighbor Throws a Fit. I won't let her in my house to take my alcohol when I'm gone. I live in a 3-unit townhome. We're all good friends and share keys with each other. One of them is my best friend who, with my approval, enters my house when I'm gone to grab a soda. In return, she cooks me food and shares her alcohol with me on weekends. Only thing is, she has the code to my house alarm. This becomes relevant later. One day, entitled Neighbor N, who lives in a different building, sees her leaving my house and asks what's up. Friend tells her what's up. N thinks we're friends just because I'm friendly to her when she comes around and texts me to rat out the neighbor. I tell her it's fine. Now, N is very obnoxious, but we're all nice to her because you don't want crazy people living across the street. And a week later comes by and asks why I won't give her a key. I make up an excuse that it's a safety thing because I'm the only one with a fire extinguisher, which is also a fact. The only excuse I can think of now is my landlord won't let me seem to shut her up. I really don't want her in my house. I can only imagine what she'll do in there and her bringing her kids over to see my crap. I have expensive computer equipment. I don't need kids around. Fast forward a month later, she sees me unload a bucket of fireball shots and quickly makes a beeline across the street and asks for some and trying to make friendly conversation. I roll my eyes and struggle with the seal and hand her two. Thanks babe, love you. Whatever, it's not a big deal. Meanwhile, she still messages me like friends, and I watch her house from time to time while she's gone. Last week I'm at my mom's house when I get a phone call from my home security system company asking if I need police. Roommate and key holders have my code, and it gives you 60 seconds to push the code even if it's wrong, so something is up. I rush home and my front door is wide open letting the hot summer air strain my electric bill, 2 cops inside. It's none other than N standing at the counter and casually says here she is. She lets me in her house. We're best friends. My jaw drops. Apparently, she has the garage door code to friend's house where she found my house keys in friend's house and has the balls to take my stuff when I'm gone like she's entitled to it. Then didn't message me that the alarm was screaming. Let me know she wanted something, and didn't even leave when the cops show up. It took the cops 8 minutes to get there, so I have no idea what she was poking around with a screaming alarm. She broke into 2 houses like it was no big deal. I demand she leaves, not pressing charges because I don't want a crazy angry neighbor. My city charges you $100 if you have an unregistered alarm system, so I get a fine from the city. I paid the fee and stuck the bill in her doorway. Haven't seen a dime of that yet. She also hasn't asked for my alcohol either since then. Thanks for listening.